Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of What's Going On in Banking. I'm your host, Ron Shevlin, Chief Research Officer at Cornerstone Advisors and author of the FinTech Snark Tank blog on Forbes. And today's topic is marketing. No, don't run, stay. This is really going to be a good conversation. I promise you this is going to be good, even though you have nothing to do with marketing and hate it. But part of it's really about understanding why marketing is having a challenge. And the topic for this episode of the podcast really came about from a LinkedIn post that I published a few weeks ago at this point, which came out of a meeting I had with a former business school professor of mine who turns out is now at Harvard, which is just down the road from me. So I got to go to Harvard. It's about as close as I was going to get to actually being admitted to Harvard, was actually going to Harvard Square. So we had lunch, and it was really a very enlightening conversation. He's been a marketing professor for really about 40 years now. And he shared some really interesting thoughts that I shared on LinkedIn. The first was that from an academic perspective, marketing is in decline. I didn't know this, but apparently the number of marketing majors at business schools is dropping, and it's been hard for a lot of the schools, even the top ones, to fill marketing classes. Now, look, it's no surprise that many MBA students at top schools and pretty much all the schools want to get into consulting and investment banking. More recently, though, the technology companies have been a top destination, but apparently few of them think that marketing classes are worth their time or effort. Another comment my former professor made was that marketing is losing and to a large extent has lost its seat in the boardrooms. He commented that as the role of the chief marketing officer came into prominence, many of the folks who filled that role didn't really have the horsepower, as he put it, to be strategic. And we saw CMO tenure drop to about 18 months and really kind of lost their seat in the boardroom. But what really hit home for me, and I think it's really going to be the core focus of this conversation today, is around, he said, marketing is simply not doing a good job of marketing itself. And to build on that, I've got a couple of folks I'd like to bring into the conversation, two folks that I've known for a very long time and have a huge amount of respect because they really do command a lot of respect in the marketing space. Mary Anne Keegan, former CMO of Intrafy, Bilgo, Early Warning. I won't say Zelle, Mary Anne, because I'm not sure that actually would help your reputation here, but let's call it just Early Warning. And Derik Sutton, the Chief Marketing Officer of Autobooks. Before Autobooks, Derik was at Jack Henry, and before that, CSI. So two folks with a ton of experience, not just in marketing, but in technology marketing, and very importantly, working with a lot of financial institutions to help them improve their marketing. So, Mary Anne, before we get into the prescription part of this, let's get into the analytics part of it and the getting at why is marketing in decline?
So, if you look at the last even decade and just let's narrow that focus last 3-5 years. I mean, marketing has been changing so rapidly as a profession. It hasn't remained static. When you think about professions like finance, accounting, there's a discipline in there that carries through over the ages. And marketing, because of technology, because of the changes in the C-suite, looking for metrics and tracking, the profession has had to evolve. And when you look at the academic side, I mean, trying to keep up of what's happening in the real world, I think is challenging. And I think for that reason, there's this gap that's been created, and the gap's getting bigger and bigger and bigger now that we look forward.
Derik, want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just echo those comments. I view marketing today a lot like, I come from as a product owner, like building products and building digital banking products. So I started my career in product and now work in marketing. And I view those very similarly. And what Mary Anne just said is marketing has really evolved into this evolving place where you go apply tools and tactics and your A/B testing, and like the metrics side of marketing is taken over. And so how does a college, much like engineering today, much like product management, how do they keep up with the latest trends and build curriculum around that? And really define, really what a university needs is a defined curriculum that they can market and sell to the market. And if you can't define what makes good marketing, what makes bad marketing, if trends are changing on a regular basis, how do you put that on the menu, if you will, for people to select from?
Yeah, great point. And you know what kind of struck me in my conversation with my former professor was this paradox that a lot of the folks coming into business school are really focused a lot these days on going to a lot of technology companies. And Mary Anne, to your point about marketing changing to becoming so much more technology driven, there's a paradox here. If marketing is becoming so much more technology driven, and a lot of the young folks coming into business school and looking for new opportunities are looking towards technology companies, you'd think there'd be a good match because marketing is becoming so technology driven. But is marketing really capitalizing and living up to the opportunities? It really, let me rephrase that. Is marketing really making the best use of marketing technology that's available today?
Yes, that's a great question, Ron. I mean, I always look at if you look at a spectrum, there's art and science. And I think marketing has been shifting. Like if you look 20 years ago, there was a lot more art and emotion tied to marketing. And the emotional element is still super important. So we'll probably get to that at some point today. But when you look at the gap that's happening between art and science, I mean, it's become much more scientific. And then when you look at the university curriculums, at least like I have two children in college, so when you look at what's being taught, it's still fundamentally focused a lot on the basic principles of marketing. It doesn't address the data component of it, which is what's required in the C-suite to be successful. You do need to have that data component. And unless the curriculum builds that in, I think we're going to continue to have this problem. The other element is, you look at, where do students spend their time or want to focus their majors? I mean, you look at starting salaries for marketing, it's not very attractive. So if you're a business student going to business school and you have an option of going into entrepreneurship or consulting, and then you look at marketing, the gap in that salary range is tremendous, which is not an accurate reflection, I believe, of the market. I think there's a place for highly compensated, very successful marketing careers, but that is never promoted at the university level. So I think for students to get attracted to that profession, there has to be more information shared and definitely a more robust curriculum around data technology and where the market is today.
Yeah, that's exactly why I pushed my kids to major in statistics and not in marketing. And I promised them, I said, you're going to get more offers and at higher money, even if you're getting marketing positions. So thankfully, two of them took me up on that, and they better be happy with it because I know one of them at least will be watching this. So, Derik, when you think about the technology that's available to marketers today, and I want you to kind of look at this from both your perspective as a technology company, but also from the banks and the credit unions' perspective, what can and should they be doing to make better use of the marketing technology that's available to them?
Go back to people. So if you want to go take advantage of the technology is a tactic, it's a tool to be used. And much of where I believe marketing has become undifferentiated, quite frankly, and it's not value accretive to an organization, it's more of a cost center, is because we focus way too much on the tools. Tools are going to be there. Tools are great. And being proficient in the tools that you can use in marketing is a great superpower, and it adds it's a net benefit add to the organization. But to differentiate and to create value, you need to get back to the people. And so, as this conversation evolves, I think the thing that's missing here is marketing used to be in university curriculums and in the boardroom. It used to be about brand equity. The value creation was about brand equity. And when you had to come up with a marketing budget and things weren't as digital, quite frankly, or analog, and you were thinking about these large, big like brand initiatives and TV ads and magazines and a CPG strategy, think about all the theory and all the tactics and the operations that have to go into pulling that out, right? That's something that you have to specialize in. And the people that were able to understand what motivated buyers and consumers to acquire and procure a solution and become attracted to and really a fan of that brand was a specialty. And it took both art and science to do that. With digital, though, you can essentially create, like creative is now a commodity. Okay, so anybody can look great. You can hire a designer for less than you ever have before. You can outsource that. If I'm a technology company or a bank, I can outsource a rebranding. strategy, right? It's a one-time thing. I maybe do it once every 3-5 years. I can outsource that. I can outsource social media if I wanted to. If I don't want to own that and have market specialty on that, I could have somebody do my paid ads and build all those ads. So all of these things have been so commoditized in marketing today, where if I'm in a C-suite, I can just reach for that tool and I can swap them in and out if they're not working well. Where it becomes differentiated is, okay, well, where does this team or this person, this individual, where do they offer value to my shareholders and to my organization that's above and beyond something else that I would reach for? And to me, that goes back to the people. It goes back to marketing, actually going back to the market, deeply understanding what motivates customers to buy, using those insights and educating customers on why they should partner with your organization, because there's so much noise. You've got to get back to those. Hey, what pain do people have? How do we step into that pain? How do we differentiate through that? Everything else around that is pretty unremarkable, if you will.
So, Mary Anne, I'm sensing a kind of disconnect in a loop here based on what Derik is saying, is that you've got a lot of new technologies to support marketing, more sophisticated technologies to both execute, analyze, track what's going on, but you need the people who have the skills to not just run it, but to analyze and understand the implications of what's going on so that the business can make smarter decisions. But we're seeing less and less people go into marketing, and maybe not this is going to sound terrible. I don't mean to say that they're not the smartest people who are going into marketing, but if we're not getting the cream of the crop in marketing, so what's happening, I think, is this death loop where the senior executives, the rest of the C-suite is saying, no, marketing's just not that good, but they want to spend more money on technology. They want more people to do it, but I'm not seeing the result on it. So screw it. I'm not giving them more money to do it. How does marketing reverse that death loop?
It's a great question, Ron. It's not a simple answer. Like it definitely starts at the top of every company. You look at the individual running an organization, their view of marketing will dictate how that team will be successful or unsuccessful in a company, in my opinion. So you have, folks that are very strategic and they allow marketing to run with strategy. In other organizations, marketing has been operationalized to some of the comments, that we made in the last several minutes. It's like if there's an element of operational element to the marketing, it's really hard to connect all the dots. I think going back to my comment on art and science, yes, technology is at everybody's fingertips. And I think many people at the C-suite go like, we can outsource all these components. It's wonderful. So, at the end of the day, like how many marketing people do we really need? How much do we have to spend on marketing? Because we have all these great tools at our disposal. But the art of that is really connecting the dots. So yes, I can have disparate metrics from all the different tools and all the technology components of my marketing stack, but really truly understanding the customer and who we're selling to Derik's point, is that art. And that is a skill that is taught. And it's a skill that's nurtured over decades of being a professional in this field. So when you go back to the universities and you're not taught any of those components, you're going to have that entry-level marketing position. I go back to salaries. Salaries are attracting these MBAs to the professions they're going to. Let's just be honest. If you're going to business school, you want to command a high salary. You've spent $250,000 plus on your education. You want a return for that. So there's a gap in that element. And I think, that's where I go back to, it starts at the top at these companies. And if you get the right CEO that really understands that, I think you have a productive team. So I think that's a big component that's really important right now to, comprehend and, how we're moving forward.
Yeah. Can I add on to that real quick, Ron?
Of course.
Yeah. So to me, connecting the dots, the very specific thing that I look to do is connect the dots to what effort am I applying? What am I spending? And how does that map to how the company makes money? If I can tell a very clear story about I've deployed this tactic or I have this resource and the day-to-day operations and tactics that they run yield this result, and this is how when we acquire this customer and do these next steps, this is how we make money as a company. And I think in many cases, marketing has lost that full story, those connected dots, as Mary Anne says. And so it's viewed as a cost center. And when it's a cost center and, an organization is looking at how do we make money, how do we create value, it's easier to map an MBA, resume to how the business makes money today than it is marketing. Because if marketing walks in and has attribution and NPS scores and all these, like Google Analytics, but they can't connect the dots, as Mary Anne said, to how the business makes money, how this directly leads to customer acquisition, long-term usage, retention, et cetera, then that's where I think the gap exists to fill for most marketers.
Yeah, both of you are alluding to something that I had written about a while back. I had published a report, I think it was back in 2018, actually. It shows how long ago it was, called Making Marketing Strategic. And I put into that report a 2x2 matrix. I've been in consulting a long time. I think in 2x2 matrices. And the vertical columns was, does the CEO get marketing? Yeah. No on the left hand. I'm not sure how you guys are looking at this. No on the left-hand side, yes on the right-hand side. And the rows were how strategic is marketing? Low strategy or high strategy? Where low is, yeah, they're really good at executing. They can run campaigns and they, can give out tchotchkes at the mall and stuff like that. Or are they really strategic? And I think what that creates is this 2x2 matrix where, of course, in the upper right-hand corner, it's the CEO gets marketing and marketing is strategic. And that's like a minority of financial institutions that are in that upper quadrant. I think a lot of them tend to fall in the either marketing is strategic, but the CEO doesn't get it. And really the CEO is the proxy for the C-suite, where they get marketing and they want the contribution of marketing. But look, let's be realistic. So many of these senior executives in banks and even in technology companies have been around so long, they've not seen strategy from marketing. So they tend to not think of marketing as a strategic contributor. But you've got a lot of sharp CMOs out there and a lot of financial institutions and fintech, bank tech companies who are struggling with not just how to execute or be strategic, but how do they shape the views of the senior management team to think of marketing as being more of a contributor. And this kind of reminds me, John Huntinghouse from Tab Bank commented on the LinkedIn post that this is really all about trust and how can marketing build more trust with the rest of the C-suite. So, Mary Anne, any thoughts on how they can do that?
So I'll share a few thoughts, but I'm going to go back to, I think you have to have, it starts with the CEO understanding what marketing is. And if you ask 10 people today, you get 10 CEOs in a room, they'll give you probably 10 different definitions of what marketing is. So I think, the data is a given. I mean, we have to present data. If you can't show ROI, you can't show data, that's going to be a big gap. So that goes without saying, I think, if you're in the CMO seat today. But there's also the cross relationship that happen inside of an organization. You can't be successful in marketing if you don't have alignment with product. You can't be successful in marketing if you don't have alignment with sales. But depending on the age of the company, some of those roles have already been defined before a CMO gets into that position. So you need to be able to cross those barriers. And then PR is another big element. Sometimes it's part of marketing, sometimes it's a separate function. So that whole corporate comm component. And then you have branding. I mean, some organizations have branding as a separate team. So I think understanding how all these components, it goes back to connecting those dots, come to play is really important. And if a CMO does not have visibility and involvement in those components, it's really hard to show, in my opinion, the full package and the value of what marketing can bring. And I think too many financial services companies today are siloed still when it comes to marketing. We've kind of broken the barrier and siloing in different functions of financial institutions, but marketing still is kind of a silo in itself. And I think there's an opportunity to have bigger visibility for that CMO so they can have more breadth and depth, because it goes back to what Derik said. You need to understand that customer that you're selling to. And it's not just marketing that touches that customer. Everybody's touching that customer in the organization, but it all has to come back to a central point so somebody can see the full picture and make the right recommendations.
Yeah. Derik, your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One, I'd probably add another column in your matrix. I know it kind of takes you out of the 2x2, but I also think there's in reality, is the financial institution trying to maintain or grow? If they're trying to maintain, I can make an argument that marketing shouldn't be in the C-suite, quite frankly. If it's just all organic and it's just status quo and the machine is set up and we take in deposits, we lend them out, I can make an argument that marketing could be just a part of doing business, if you will. Now, if I'm trying to grow, then that becomes different. The other thing I would say is the ability to own the pipeline in marketing. That's one of the things that I would emphasize. So yes, having reporting ROI, all those things are a requirement, but how willing are you to put your neck on the line to say I own part of the pipeline? Because at the end of the day, the CEO can look at the chief lending officer of the lending group and say, what's your pipeline for loan growth? Who are the customers we're meeting with? What events are we running? What are we taking them to the golf tournament, whatever? And do we close that deal? And if marketing is walking in with, hey, here's my MQLs and my SQLs and my Facebook attribution, the CEO having them map that to the mental model of how does this lead to us closing a deal? Where is this non-interest fee income? Is this something else? And you're like, well, this is all the data. Look at what all these tools are telling me. And so is the marketing team willing to go further into the pipeline to say, hey, sales, I'm willing to own part of the actual sale, right? Like fully enabled, partnering with product on the digital side. When it comes to this customer segment or maybe this way of inbound, I want to own that from influencing the customer to acquiring the customer to monetizing the customer. I'm willing to put my neck on the line. Then all of a sudden you become part of the revenue conversation of the financial institution or any technology organization, and you start to influence the C-suite in a different way.
Yeah, so you're saying that, Derik. I'm hearing 50 chief revenue officers going, no way marketing's owning any part of the pipeline. So there's a chicken and egg problem here of kind of owning up, earning the right to kind of do that. I want to run another thought by you guys as well. In my conversation with my former professor, I said, it always struck me as funny that when I went to college, I took economics classes, and there was microeconomics and macroeconomics. Micro was about the theory of the firm. Macro was about the theory of the economy as a whole. And in marketing, we don't have micro marketing and macro marketing, where micro marketing is about, understanding the individual consumer and what motivates them and what they want, their needs are, where macro marketing is really understanding the broader marketplace as a whole and where it's going. And I think to a large extent, I think over the past 15 years, marketing has dug a hole for themselves in micro marketing, all about knowing what's the right message at the right time, at the right place to that right individual, and how do we personalize this? And I think they've kind of missed, well, what's going on in the market as a whole? How are things changing? Everybody loves to talk about millennials and Gen Zers being different, but none of that really seems to be incorporated into the organization in terms of different marketing approaches, products, tools, technologies, things like that. Do you guys think in terms like that, Mary Anne? Do you think in terms of a distinction between micro versus macro marketing, and is it worthwhile to think in these terms?
I think it depends on the organization. So if you have just one product and, it's successful and you're a mature organization, it becomes more operational. But I think if you're in a growth stage and you're trying to grow a company, especially when you look at fintechs that are growing rapidly, you do have to take that lens. There is a micro view and there's a macro view. But the macro view to me is where I think the shine comes in for marketers. Like to me, that is the discipline, because the micro view, your data, you learn the tool, you track. But it goes back to, connecting all those dots. That's the macro view, understanding how all that data impacts the bigger picture and how that data is going to actually make a difference. And that kind of also gets us more into the branding side, because the brand to me is that, that 360 degree view of the company. And that's at the macro view. And that's where when you look at universities and what's being taught, it's difficult to say, we're going to teach you about an industry, because every industry, if I'm in pharmaceuticals, if I go into fintech, it's all different. So, but the talent and the discipline of marketing to know how to do that is very important. So, your question about, or your comment earlier about MBAs graduating and not having marketing, they become these CEOs of the companies. So if they don't have that understanding, you can go in with all the tools, all the data, but if they don't understand how that benefits the organization or how that impacts the organization, it becomes a difficult conversation. It just will never get across that finish line to where we need it to be in marketing today.
Yeah. So we got just a couple minutes left, and I want to get to some very poignant questions. Derik, you commented on the LinkedIn blog, post a couple weeks ago that part of the challenge is balancing the tension between long-term attention and short-term results. So how do you deal with that tension?
Yeah, so it goes back to the conversation we just had. To me, that is the micro and the macro to a degree. So the way I deal with that is, you kind of think in there used to be a product theory where you think in like, what can we ship in 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months? And I think about that a little bit in marketing as well. So what tactics and what things are we deploying in the near term to lead results for an engagement? But what do I have running consistently, thinking long term to build, as Mary Anne said, really that brand value? And that would be the macro approach, Ron. So it's what tactics and what about the industry am I constantly tapping into that builds the macro view of, in our case, how Autobooks is seen in the industry. For us, that's a lot of education. And so, we want to focus on education. At the end of the day, we realize we're trying to, institute behavioral change. We're trying to change people's habits, both on the small business side and on the banking side. And to do that, it's not always just an in the moment thing that takes place. Sometimes that may work, but long term, if I'm trying to change behaviors, change habits, change perception, that takes a long term, consistent flow of information and education in the industry to build, as Mary Anne said, what most people probably call brand, and brand value in the industry. Now, tactically, short term, I can run different tactics. I can join a podcast. I can, spin up an email campaign. I can do something, to tactically move the needle in the near term. What we have to recognize and realize, though, is oftentimes organizations reach for the short term. There's pressure to do the short term thing because they're needing this short term influence, a short term bump. What we have to recognize is that will always eat into the long term. And so as a marketer, you have to be able to balance that conversation, but you have to understand how the two, we keep saying that the dots are connected between the two, and help the organization understand the trade-off in making that decision. If you can clearly communicate trade-offs and help people understand, I can do this, but this is the long-term, impact, then I think you've got a long way towards building equity internally with your organization.
Great. Sounds great. Mary Anne, last question for you. I've known you for a long time, and I know firsthand how influential you are in the organizations that you work with, the C-suite and the CEO. And we've been talking a lot in this discussion about marketing as a department or a function more generically. But what I really want you to do is talk to the CMOs out there who struggle with being more strategic and having more strategic contribution. What advice do you give them to kind of move up my 2x2 from the lower level to the higher level, not from a departmental perspective, but from an individual perspective?
So you never stop learning. Let's just start with the basic fundamentals. I think that's like the kiss of death if you stop learning as a marketer. I personally love to get my hands into things and get dirty. Like I feel like I'm only as good as I understand how everything works. So yes, I can hire someone to do social media. And yes, I can hire people to do digital marketing. But if I truly understand how those components work, that only makes me better at what I do. And I find like I know some of my peers, they have a phenomenal team, but they don't really get into the weeds with their team. So, and maybe it's because I have a fintech background, so I've had to do that over the many years. But, I feel like that is very important because what you see on paper is not always what's real behind the scenes. And only you can really help connect the dots again. It's like you have to be that glue. So delegating too much of our business to the team over time is really hard to look at the bigger picture, like we were just talking about. I think short term, you could put things on autopilot and run them with all the tools and all the marketing stack components that are available today. but it's the long term. That's where you really get into the marketing, and really trying to understand that is really important. The other part is, you have to put the right people in the seats that you're hiring as a CMO. There's so many marketers out there today, and trying to weed through those that really can understand that component that they're being hired to do versus just being able to talk marketing, which kind of goes back to the beginning of this podcast. If you're not taking those classes, you're not understanding marketing, and you're put in those positions, you're never going to have that dimension. So maybe your third dimension is really understanding that emotional connection and brand. I mean, that comes like with any other profession. It's a discipline. So those are just, a few things that come to mind.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm a little surprised that you didn't mention something that if you had asked me what that question was, I would have said, I think it's about having a better understanding of the rest of the business. I saw this as a IT strategy consultant for years before becoming an analyst, and it was the good IT departments that really knew the business. And I think this is part of the challenge that a lot of marketing individuals and marketing departments have, is that they are too focused on the marketing parts of the job, and don't really understand their internal clients and the internal business. And I think being able to, as a CMO, to talk to the rest of the C-suite about how marketing can help improve their organization. Now, that's not a direct thing sometimes, but understanding the business better, I think, generates a lot more respect for the CMO in particular. So guys, listen, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy day to chat with this. Thank you, Derik Sutton. Thank you, Mary Anne Keegan. Thank you, everybody, joining us today. Hope you'll join us again later in another episode of the What's Going On in Banking podcast. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks, Ron.